My Stirling Single Part 43. Piping the water valves and making fittings for the ends of the copper water pipes, not forgetting my prostate biopsy. Yesterday, the 19th of April 2022, I had to visit a hospital to have a prostate biopsy, and I was dreading this. And here I am a short while after the prostate biopsy once I returned home, sat in my editing room. I've just removed my name tag, and here it is, right next to one of the many bottles of water that I was drinking during the day, just to make sure that my internal plumbing was okay. This prostate biopsy was nothing like I thought it was going to be when my overactive imagination was going completely wild before the procedure. I have a series called In the Workshop which contains many videos. And because quite a lot of my viewers are around about my age, I'm going to make a special video, and I will call that In the Hospital. But for the moment, it's back to this series, and I'm doing something very important. Completing the water piping job on my Stirling Singles tender. With the tender frames in position, this shows me that all of the piping and the water valves are in the correct place. The job isn't quite finished yet. There are 2 more pieces of water piping to put in place, and I'm also going to make some special brass end connectors to accept the silicone rubber tubing. The long pipe you can see in the middle, the one with the coil at one end of it, is the main feed from the water pump, and that is a pressure connection. But the rest of the piping will be connected to the engine, as I've just mentioned, by using flexible silicone rubber tubing. Now for something completely different. This is the drawbar that connects the tender to the engine. It was unpainted and very rusty because this locomotive has been run in an unpainted state around a track by the previous owner. I cleaned off the rust and I'm about to paint the part using some high-build etching primer. Whenever I use spray paint, I always use it right next to an open door in the outer part of the workshop. And here the part is sat on a bolt and I'm holding it over my brazing hearth while I paint it. Back now to the inner part of the workshop. I need to make a couple of pieces of pipe that go from the bottom of the water valves, and I need to make it so that these 2 pipes line up with the inlet pipes on the locomotive. Both of these pipes don't need to stick out very far. This pipe is far too long. I'm going to cut it down. A few weeks ago I bought quite a lot of 4mm piping, and this is slightly too big to fit in the 5/32 of an inch union cones. It's not a big problem though, and it's very simple to reduce the diameter of the pipe using my 1-inch belt sander. Once I'd silver soldered the pipe to the union connector, I made a mark on it and I'm going to cut it to this length. As you can now see, the pipe is a lot shorter. This leaves a good distance between the pipe and the main water inlets at the back of the locomotive. Here I'm fitting a second pipe. This is going to be used to connect a second piece of silicone rubber tubing to the other inlet on the back of the engine at the other side. I may need to provide some extra support for this piece of pipe, but for the moment I'm just tightening the union nut to see how rigid it feels. There are 2 long pieces of pipe fitted to the bracket, as you can see. One of them is 1/4 of an inch in diameter and the other one is 3/16 of an inch in diameter. To accommodate the type of silicone rubber tubing that I'm going to use, the end of each pipe needs to have a fitting which is 1/4 of an inch in diameter, and here is a piece of 1/4 inch bar that I'm going to make the fittings from. I fit the piece of bar into the 3-jaw chuck in my Boxford lathe, and the first thing to do is to centre drill the end. By using a centre drill, that makes sure that the hole is in the middle of the bar, because unlike a twist drill as shown here, a centre drill doesn't wobble about much, because it's very short, very thick and doesn't move around very much. Thinking about it, I've had a few girlfriends like that. I'm drilling the piece of brass only part way through. As I've recently shown in a previous video, if I drill all the way through, then the drill's going to wander about. And that would be quite pointless because the parts that I'm making are only 3/4 of an inch long, and here I've set the position for the parting tool. It's very important not to have a sharp edge at the rear end of this fitting. The front end of course needs to be rounded to accept the tube, but as I've mentioned many times before, a 90-degree cut is razor sharp, and that would cut the end of the tube. A simple solution: I start the parting operation, then I stop parting and use a file to remove the sharp edge. That ensures that the finished component is not sharp at either end. I made 3 of these adapters and it's time to solder them in position. The first of the longer pipes is 3/16 of an inch in diameter, and I drilled one of the fittings 3/16 of an inch down the middle. I painted the pipe with some Friolux paint. This is solder paint. All I need to do now is heat it up with my Proxon blowtorch. This small butane-powered blowtorch generates an alarming amount of heat for its size, and in no time at all, the part is hot enough to melt solder, as you can see here. I always apply a little bit extra solder just to be on the safe side. In this clip, I'm soldering one of the adapters onto the end of the 5/32 of an inch or 4mm pipe. I thought I would clean up the soldered joint with a wet paintbrush. The final part to solder is a short stubby pipe from the first of the water valves, using exactly the same principle. And here is the finished job. Obviously, I don't need to solder a fitting onto the end of the 1/4 of an inch diameter pipe, because that is already a 1/4 of an inch in diameter. Just to make sure that everything fits together, I've put the frames back in position, and I'm very pleased to say that everything fits together just fine. When I repainted the tender frames, one side at a time, and not really using masking tape, I got some of the paint on the stretchers underneath, and this really doesn't matter, but I thought, no, I'll paint it black and make it match. In the centre of both of the frame stretchers is a hole. On this particular frame stretcher, it's designed so that the drain valve can poke through this hole. It's a bit odd really, there isn't any need for a drain valve. To drain the tender, all I would do is remove the silicone rubber pipe from the 1/4 of an inch pipe, and obviously that's at the lowest point, so that would drain the tender. But no, this has a special tap. Here I've just painted the second frame stretcher, which is identical to the first, complete with holes that it doesn't need. The other 2 holes are used for a bracket, which in turn supports the valve. Once I'd finished the painting, here's a shot of it drying. This video is actually back to front. The first clip showing me back from the hospital should have been shown at the end. I edited this stage of the video just before I went for the biopsy, and I was quite full of fear and self-doubt. But so far the procedure hasn't quite worked out the way it did in my head before I had it done. At some stage I will make the in the hospital video, but I'm not going to do this prematurely. I need to make sure that everything is fine first. But don't worry, if anybody out there is going for a prostate biopsy, it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. After saying that, I can say no more. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.